The Theory of Flight, Book 2, Part 1, Epistemology, Chapter 22, Genie. When Genie was among the sunflowers, it was like a remembering of a self all but forgotten. There was nothing she enjoyed more than digging her toes into the moist reddish-brown soil first thing in the morning. She loved the prickle of her skin when her bare arms came into contact with the long, thin stalks of the sunflowers. She would turn her face towards the sun, peeping through the sunflower petals, and, eyes closed, listen to the hum and buzz of the busy bees above. She strongly suspected that she had once upon a time been a sunflower, for she too was thin and tall, reaching for the sky. She too had a brown face that was turned up towards the sun. She too loved the gentle sway of the breeze. The only difference between herself and the sunflowers was that they had yellow halos, and hers was a reddish-brown like the soil. But differences in life were allowed and to be expected. Her childhood among the sunflowers dances and flashes in Genie's mind as she watches the bloodstain grow and morph on the white sheets. For a while the bloodstain had looked like a butterfly, a moth, some winged crimson creature. Now it looks like the map of a country with rather fluid borders, a country she knows well. She wishes more than anything that she had been able to save the mattress, but she fears the blood, her blood, has soaked right through the sheets and onto it. Vita will have to buy a new one. She feels a deep sense of regret, because this has been his favorite mattress. They have been together for more than 20 years and have had 3 mattresses. The first proved too lumpy, the second too springy. It was this one, the third, that had been just right, firm with a little give. Once she started bleeding, she should have shifted to the floor, saved the mattress, and saved Vida the trouble of having to buy a new one. But now she is too weak to do anything but lie here and wait, alone, with nothing for company but Vida's absence. It was Marcus who had taught her an important lesson about absence. Because of him she had discovered that an absence, like a presence, occupies space. It has proportions, parameters, and a sense of permanence. Because of him she had realized that an absence is actually more steadfast than a presence. You cannot take another's presence with you wherever you go, but another's absence need never leave you. Because of him she had learned that an absence, like a presence, is something you could come to know intimately. And suddenly, as if conjured by this absence, there is a presence. A boy, Sikhumbuzo, who sits a few rows in front of her in class, points an accusatory finger at her as he screams, "You are dead! You are dead! You need to lie down on the ground. I have killed you! I have killed you! On the ground, now!" His chest is puffed up with something that truly terrifies Genie. They must be playing either RF versus Terrors, War, Bazooka, or Take Cover, because all these games involve having to make a rat-a-tat sound while you point handmade wire AK-47s at each other, lob imaginary grenades, and detonate equally imaginary landmines. The gleeful eagerness required to kill off all of your friends and be the last one standing is what defeats Genie in the end. She throws down her wire AK-47. "You have killed me. I am dead," she says to Sikhumbuzo before walking away. "You cannot walk away. You are dead. You are dead. You need to lie on the ground. I have killed you. I have killed you. On the ground, now. Those are the rules of the game. You cannot follow the rules of the game. You are dead," Sikhumbuzo shouts, looking both angry and hurt. Next thing Genie knows, she is standing on the carcass of an abandoned car, brown car, surrounded by a field of sunflowers. She has Penelope in the crook of her right arm and Specs in the crook of her left arm. Penelope and Specs join her in looking over the hazy blue hills in the distance. The sunflowers turn their heads towards the hazy blue hills as well, and wait patiently with them. Together they watch as Genie's parents become a giant pair of silver wings that take to the skies and turn into a flash of light and color as they glint and gleam in the sunlight. The giant wings become smaller and smaller, until finally they are a mere speck in the azure sky. And then, as if by magic, the tiny speck turns into nothingness, and her parents vanish. Genie is still in the safety of the sunflowers when she sees 2 army trucks drive up the dirt road and make their way towards the Beaufort Farm and Estate compound. In the army trucks are soldiers, carrying very real AK-47s and wearing garish red berets. Soon after the soldiers' arrival, she hears incessant screams, intermittent rat-a-tats, incoherent voices shouting, incomprehensible voices wailing. She smells flesh burning, not mouth-watering, but nauseating, definitely not something edible, not an animal that you eat, a different kind of animal, a human being, someone. Someone is burning. And then suddenly it is all over. No screams, no rat-a-tats, no voices shouting, no voices wailing, but still the smell of burning human flesh. She hears the army trucks come back down the dirt road. One of the trucks stops next to the sunflower field. There is the shuffle of boots on the dirt road. Then the smell of burning grass. "Put it out," a voice booms. "What have sunflowers ever done to you?" The truck starts up again, and the boots start their shuffle, stop, hesitate. The sun has begun to set on the horizon, marking the end of the day. Genie knows that all the days that break henceforth will never be felt the same way. She opens her eyes. She looks around her. Has she been dreaming or just remembering? She does not know. She is not on the Beaufort Farm and Estate. She is not among the sunflowers. She is in a room, a lovely room filled with whites, creams, golds, and richly reddish-brown teak wood. Her room. The room she shares with Vita. Their room, on a bed, a lovely bed, now stained with red with her blood. Her bed. The bed she shares with Vita. Their bed. Yet still the smell of burning human flesh lingers. Her stomach heaves, but nothing comes up. She has nothing left to give. At least she, knowing that this moment was inevitable, had the foresight to take care of some things. She had Vita's only suit dry cleaned. She remembers standing at the dry cleaner's, holding Vita's jacket to her nose, and breathing in his scent as the woman behind the counter looked at her with a raised eyebrow but did not say anything. She personally ironed his favorite white shirt and made sure to starch his collar. She had Stefanos buff Vita's shoes to a brilliant shine. She had Matilda assemble and lay out his accessories, a handkerchief, a tie, a pair of argyle socks, and an ivy cap. Funny that during her final moments, her thoughts and concerns should be so domestic. After a lifetime of believing she was in flight, of believing that she was something spectacular in the sky, had she rather been a hybrid thing, something rooted but free to fly? Could such a hybrid thing even exist? All she knows is that in this life she has reached for something and touched it, and that is enough. When, at the end, all that remains is a blood-soaked mattress that will have to be thrown out, a mattress with a blood stain that has taken the shape of a country, perhaps what matters then is that it is enough, has been enough, was enough. Matter. Interesting word, that. She allows herself to fall into it, into its darkness. She is back in the field of sunflowers, with Marcus this time. Together they watch as the boot of a car pops open, and out of it slowly unfolds an impossibly tall man. He is unlike any man they have ever seen before. He is taller than even the sunflowers, or so it seems. He is magnificent. It is when he looks directly at them, through the sunflower stalks, that Genie knows for sure that this magnificent tall man is her father, Golide Gomede. Her father, she has always known, would arrive like a hero in a story. His eyes zero in on hers, and Genie struggles loose from Marcus's tenacious grip and runs out of the sunflower field towards her father. Her father gets down on his knees and reaches out a hand to touch her, gently, tentatively, as though she truly were the most precious and beautiful thing in the world. In that moment, she knows that her mother has been telling the truth all along. She, Genie, was hatched from a golden egg. She smiles at her father, revealing the gap between her 2 front teeth. Her father smiles too, revealing the gap between his 2 front teeth. An inheritance. Hoisted on her father's shoulders, Genie can, for the first time, see above the heads of the sunflowers. She notices that the sunflowers' faces are no longer facing the sun, but have turned, each and every one, towards her father and her as they make their way home. She sees her mother, Elizabeth Nyoni, running towards them with a rainbow of colour trailing behind her, her blonde hair all but flying away, her arms outstretched in joy and welcome. Genie knows without a doubt that the future has arrived. The crunch of car tires on gravel, the squeaky swing of a gate opening, the dance of headlights on the bedroom wall pull Genie out of the darkness she had entered and into the darkness of the room. She hears footsteps on the stairs. Vita, finally, home. Chapter 22. Vita. Vita knows instantly that the house is dark because Genie is not in it. On a normal day, the lights in the kitchen, in the living room, and in their bedroom would be on. Genie hates walking into an unlit room. The back door leading into the kitchen is not locked. Vita does not know whether to find this suspicious or not. He turns on the kitchen light and immediately notices 2 glasses on the kitchen table. 2 glasses. Both empty, save for a desiccated wedge of lemon at the bottom of each. It is the desiccation of the lemon wedges that fills his heart with fear. Something is not right. Where is Genie? Where are Matilda and Stephanos? How long has everyone been gone? What exactly has happened here? Without being aware of what he is doing, he makes his way to the bedroom. In the bedroom, Genie is sleeping peacefully in a bloom of her own blood. The next thing that Vita becomes fully aware of is that he is standing in the cold corridors outside the intensive care unit at the Mater Dei Hospital. Dr. Mambo is gently touching him on the shoulder, explaining to him that there is really nothing he can do, and that it is best for him to go home. She is trying to be kind, he knows, but he cannot find the kindness in what she says. You standing here, looking like that, will not change things either way. Looking like what? Vita looks down. That is when he notices it. On his trembling hands, on his shirt, on his shoes. Blood. Genie's blood. Please, Vita, go home. Take care of yourself. Once home, he cannot bring himself to sleep. He cannot bring himself to take off his clothes. He cannot bring himself to take a shower. He feels that washing Genie's blood off his body would be a resignation, a betrayal. He does not want to go upstairs and face the blood-stained bed. He does not want to go upstairs and face the absence of Genie. So he sits at the kitchen table and looks at the 2 glasses with the desiccated lemon wedges. Genie has obviously had company at some point while he was away. He feels that this matters, but does not know how it matters. And where are Matilda and Stephanos? Why are they not here? When such a thing happened, why were they both not here? It all seems too coincidental to be a real coincidence. He feels that there are dots to be connected, and that if he connected the dots, he would know something really worth knowing. But he is tired, mind and body, tired. In the early hours of the morning, when he is just about to fall asleep, or has been asleep for a little while without realizing it, still thinking that he is thinking when in fact he has been dreaming, a memory from the day before presents itself. His only suit, newly dry-cleaned, still in its protective plastic covering, and his favorite shirt ironed with a crisp collar, just the way he likes it, both hanging from the coat rack with, beneath them, his favorite shoes polished to a brilliant shine, an ivy cap, a pair of argyle socks, a handkerchief and a tie laid out neatly on the footstool next to the coat rack. He had noticed the clothes as soon as he turned on the light, but more surprising than that had been Genie's suitcase at the foot of the bed on which Genie lay bleeding. He pushes himself away from the kitchen table, bounds up the stairs, rushes down the corridor, opens the door to their bedroom, makes a point of not looking at the bed with its bloodstain, and opens Genie's suitcase. And then the truth of his situation makes itself known. There, placed neatly among Genie's childhood clothes, are Penelope and Specs, and Blue's baby blue silk slippers. Genie had prepared herself to leave him, and she had done her best to prepare him as well. But none of this does anything to solve the mystery of the 2 glasses with desiccated lemon wedges in them. It is now clear to him that Genie has made sure that Matilda and Stephanos were not there when she entertained whoever it was. Who was the someone who had paid Genie a visit? Who was the someone for whom she had opened the door and fixed a drink that required a lemon wedge? Who was the someone for whom she had taken the time to cut a lemon into wedges? She had taken the time to collect his only suit from the dry cleaners. She had taken the time to enter her old bedroom and pick up the 3 possessions she had entered this home with: her suitcase, her rag doll Penelope, and her teddy bear Specs. She had taken the time to put Blue's baby blue silk slippers in her suitcase. She had taken the time to leave clues behind, clues that let Vita know without a doubt that just as easily as she had chosen to enter his life, she had chosen to leave it, that she had chosen this end for herself. Feeling betrayed, Vita enters the shower fully clothed and lets the water wash the blood, Genie's blood, off his body and clothes. That is when he sees them, a pair of sunglasses on the ledge of the basin. They do not belong to him. They do not belong to Genie. Someone has entered not only their kitchen, but their bathroom as well, and Genie has let whoever it was into their sanctum. He looks at the pair of sunglasses, unable to comprehend what they signify, until the water washing over his body turns ice cold. It is an impotent act of revenge. He wears the clothes that Genie had so carefully prepared for him to wear to her funeral. He walks out of their bedroom, down the stairs, through the kitchen, where he makes a point of not looking at the 2 glasses on the kitchen table, out the back door, down the driveway, through the gate and onto the streets. He walks with no thought of where he is going. All that matters to him is that he is putting distance between himself and the desiccated lemon wedges, the packed suitcase, and the blood-stained bed. The sunglasses are safely tucked in his breast pocket. Chapter 23. Jesus. Genie watches Vita, fascinated as he blows perfect smoke rings out of his mouth. She captures one floating ring in her mouth before it disintegrates into nothingness. Then she starts giggling uncontrollably and infectiously. He cannot help but laugh. She sits and he lies on one of the koppies in the backyard, both high on premium Tonga dacha. The night air is comfortably cool. They have come out to watch the stars, brilliant and seemingly close enough to touch in an ink-black sky, but all they have done is look at each other. He reaches up and gently pulls her head down towards his. She smiles and leans forward to kiss him. They have never kissed before. Their lips touch lightly, tentatively, imperfectly. Then Vita is filled with the knowledge that this moment is not real. He tries to hold on to the moment, a memory within a dream, for just a little while longer, but cruelly, unforgivably, Genie's touch fades away. Thankfully, her scent is still there, warm vanilla on his shirt collar. Vita opens his eyes. The sunlight, harsh even in winter, is blinding. His eyes accustom themselves to his surroundings. Pavement, cold, grimy. Awning, sun-beaten, tattered. To-ing and fro-ing people, helter-skelter traffic, noise and noxious fumes, the heart of the city, diseased now, but still beating its erratic beat. How long has it been? 3 days since he took to the streets? Downing's bakery closed down years ago, so he no longer has the security of the alleyway, nor the comfort of freshly baked bread. Something is fluttering on Vida's chest. He looks down to see a colourful bird. The bird looks at him quizzically. It flutters again, a little unsteadily, a broken wing on the mend. "Aren't you a colourful one? Pretty," he says, "and friendly too." He is overwhelmed by a need to touch the bird, to touch the colourful feathers before it flies away. He tentatively lifts his right hand. Just then, someone shoves the Chronicle newspaper into his hand. "You made the headline," the person says, walking away before Vita can clearly make him out. Frightened, the bird flies away. Vita feels robbed and angry. He looks at the newspaper in his hands. In big, bold letters, the headline reads, "Jesus back on streets." There is a picture of him, Vita, taking up half the page. definitely not his finest hour, which, of course, is exactly why he made the headline. Mouth wide open and drooling, an open bottle half empty of something he no longer remembers drinking dangling in his hand. Despite the sensational headline and embarrassing picture, the reporter, one Begitemba Nyati, does not have much to report. The story reads, "The man once known as the Messiah of the streets is back. Having first disgraced the streets with his presence in the 1980s, when he could be seen still faithfully wearing his RF military fatigues long after the liberation struggle had ended, the ex-soldier disappeared without a trace in the mid-1990s. He is now back, thankfully minus the military attire. The question on everyone's lips, of course, is, why is Jesus back? Some say he is one of those white farmers whose land has been rightfully reclaimed. Some say his illegal activities, which we can only wonder what those are, have finally caught up with him. Some say he gambled away his immense wealth. If he has a sober moment, we would like to ask him some questions and get to the bottom of this." Vida gets up. Finally, he has something to do, something other than waiting. He swoons and steadies himself against the wall. He has one serious babalas, but he is determined. He needs to set the record straight, make things right again. He has never been known as the Messiah of the streets, ever. He has never been a white farmer, ever. The only thing he ever gambled was his life, but everyone did that in the 1970s in one way or another. This Begitemba Nyati needs to be taught the facts. He stops, suddenly uncertain. There was a bird that landed on his chest a few minutes ago, wasn't there? Or was he imagining things? He hopes not. He wants to take comfort in the knowledge that such a colorful bird exists, and that it would feel safe enough with him to land on his chest. There was a bird. I had a bird, a colorful bird, not so long ago. He finds himself asking, no, telling a complete stranger. The stranger, a street vendor selling sad-looking tomatoes and onions on the corner, looks up at him and smiles. Her eyes, however, seem to look through him. "I had a bird, a beautiful and colorful bird, didn't I?" Vida repeats, this time making sure to state it as a question. "Are you talking to me?" the street vendor asks, an uncertain smile on her lips. "I'm afraid my eyes are not for beauty to see," she says. It is then that Vida realizes that the woman is blind. "I'm sorry," he mumbles as he continues on his journey. He turns back and says to her, "There is no beauty to be seen, not any more." But with all the street noise, he is sure that she does not hear him. Vida had thought his disheveled appearance would create a problem. However, it turns out to be surprisingly easy to enter the Chronicle's premises and gain access to Begitemba Nyati. "I have never been a white farmer," Vida says, tossing the newspaper onto Begitemba Nyati's desk. "I'm having a bloody sober moment, so here I am. Ask me why I'm back on the street," Vida says, pacing the small room. It is true that he is sober now. Walking the streets always has that effect on him, clears his head and helps him focus. Surprisingly, and to his dismay, Vida finds himself struggling not to feel sorry for Begitemba Nyati. He wants to feel angry. He needs to stay angry. Anger is an active emotion. It is much better than being reconciled. But this Begitemba Nyati, sitting in this minuscule, decrepit office, is arousing his sympathy. How could he not, when everything around him is sadness? The chairs, there are only 2, are so old that the cushioning has been completely eaten away by years of overuse. One of the legs of the desk is leveled by a brick, and wafting through the only window in the room is the acrid smell of sun-baked urine from the alleyway below. Pathetic. If he had to work in this environment every day, he too would write with a poison pen. "Jesus," Begitemba Nyati says. "The name is Vida." "Vida de Villiers, I know." "How may I help you?" Begitemba Nyati asks, managing somehow to look professional. "I have never been a white farmer, never been white, never been a farmer." "You look white." "Well, I'm not. I'm colored." "I see. And I was never known as the Messiah of the streets. They just call me Jesus." I know, but you have to admit that the Messiah of the streets has a nice ring to it. It very may well have, but they just called me Jesus. Would you like some tea? Beggitembe Nyati asks, suddenly getting up. Let me make us some tea. I have a good green tea. My wife sends it to me. She's in England. It will calm you, help you relax. I don't want to be calm. I don't want to relax. I want you to print the facts. Vida de Villiers is back on the street because Imogen Zula Nyoni is lying in a coma in Mater Dei Hospital, and he refuses, absolutely refuses, to go home without her. Beggitembe Nyati sighs heavily. Look, Vida, I know about Imogen. There is no way I can print that story. A man driven to the streets because his wife is lying in a coma in Mater Dei Hospital? We are not married, Vida corrects. We live in a time of HIV and AIDS, Beggitembe Nyati continues. Everyone knows someone in hospital who is fighting to survive. That fact alone, that we all know someone who is struggling to be alive, should be the headline every day, but it is not. It is our reality, the way we live now, our truth. So of course, we cannot acknowledge it, let alone print it. We cannot print what matters. We never print the truth. But we still have to sell the paper somehow. So in the end, all we have is sensationalism. And that is what your story had to be. I am really sorry. Truly. I can't go back to a home she's not in, Vida says, realizing with dread that he is dangerously close to crying. I think I will go ahead and make us that cup of tea, Beggitembe Nyati says, leaving the office and making sure to close the door firmly behind him. Vida understands that he has been given a chance to cry in private. He appreciates it. Jesus wept, Vida says when Beggitembe Nyati returns after a while with a kettle of boiled water in his right hand and 2 mugs, one chipped, the other slightly cracked, in his left. Maybe that can be your headline tomorrow, Vida says with a sad smile. There are a few awards and certificates on Beggitembe Nyati's desk. Vida examines them. Apparently, once upon a time, this Beggitembe Nyati was quite an accomplished journalist. Those are from another lifetime, Beggitembe Nyati says, handing Vida the slightly cracked mug. The 80s and 90s. We had some room then, granted not much, but some room to do actual journalism. He puts a tea bag in each mug and then pours the water. Those were the days. Vida sits down on the decushioned chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. I'm the one who broke the Golide Gomede story in the 80s, Beggitembe Nyati says, his chest slightly puffing up with pride, a faraway look in his eyes. Met Imogen and her mother, Elizabeth. Very interesting family, that one. You could tell just by looking that something was different there. It was like they were inhabiting a world of their own, and happy, very, very happy. And Imogen was a revelation, so bright, intelligent, sharp. I think she actually interviewed me. Shame what happened. Damn shame. I sometimes think that if I hadn't written that story, then none of it would have happened. Well, he says, snapping back to the present, his shoulders sagging under the memory of it all. Saved my life, Golide Gomede did, Vida says. Found me in the bush listening to Janis Joplin. You were listening to Janis Joplin in the bush? I was 17 years old and stupid and very much in love with Janis. I took her everywhere. He had his AK-47 pointed right here. Vida points at his forehead. Could have blown my head off, but he didn't. And years later you married his daughter. I think that's something worth drinking to, Beggitembe Nyati says, taking a sip of his green tea. It certainly is, Vida says, also taking a sip from his mug and not bothering to correct Beggitembe Nyati this time, choosing instead to take comfort in the fact that in someone's world he and Genie are married. Galen House is populated with too many people, all ailing from something. The intake section is full. The corridors are full. Dr. Dingane Masugu's waiting area is full. The nurses look hurried and hostile. The doctors seem absent-minded and aloof. Do you have an appointment? The young nurse behind the desk asks without bothering to look up from the patient files she is working on. That is the other thing the waiting area is filled with. Piles and piles of khaki and manila patient files. No, The nurse twists her mouth. Take a number, take a chart, fill out your name, medical history, and what brings you here today. Try to be as brief as possible. Do you have medical insurance? Yes. The twist in the nurse's mouth loosens. With which company? I'm here to see Dr. Masuku. All these people are here to see Dr. Masuku. Some of them even have appointments. It's about his daughter, Genie. The nurse looks at him then. There is a flash of recognition. Oh, Jesus, of course. I'm sorry. I thought he's with a patient now, but if you go into the second examination room, he will be with you momentarily. In the examination room, Vita has no choice but to sit on the green pleather examination bed. The other chair, a rolling bar stool, is obviously the doctor's chair. The room smells antiseptic, too antiseptic, as though it is afraid to entertain even a single germ or the notion of dirt. Instead of reassuring Vita, the smell worries him. Good afternoon, Mrs. Sikauge, Dingani says, drawing open the white curtain as he reads from a chart. The ticker's still not ticking correctly, I see. Dingani finally looks up from the chart with a smile that quickly dissipates. Vita, you're not Mrs. Sikauge. I know I'm not. What are you doing here? I came to inform you that Genie is in a coma. She's at Mater Dei Hospital in ICU. I see, Dingaan says. I see. He sits down slowly. I see. He looks defeated by something that he has been struggling with for a very long time. Dingaan reminds Vita of a lion he once saw at a zoo in Stockholm. The lion was alone, in the snow, so very far away from the savannah. Its coat looked mangy and moth-eaten. It was the most miserable creature that Vita had ever seen. When he looked at it, it looked away, almost as though it was ashamed. Vita understood that the lion had lost its pride, and that was why it was capable of feeling shame. But he did not blame the lion. He blamed the people who had removed it from its natural habitat. This is what Dingaan, sitting there without his family, reminds Vita of. A lion without his pride. Why? Dingaan asks. Why what? Why is she in a coma? Whatever sympathy Vita had for the prideless Dingaan instantly disappears. This man is no lion. He is an ostrich. Why is she in a coma? Dingaan repeats. Why do you think? Vita asks. He holds Dingaan's gaze until Dingaan looks away. I had heard something, of course, but one does not want to believe such a thing to be true. Vita watches as whatever has been propping Dingaan up gives away, leaving him hunched over and hollowed out. What did you do? Dingaan asks the question quietly, looking at the black and grey checkered linoleum floor of the examination room. Vita does not know whether Dingaan has directed the question at himself or to him. He decides to leave before he finds out. He jumps off the bed and makes his way to the door. This is your fault. Your fault. Dingaan's voice is louder this time, but he is still looking at the floor, and so Vita still does not know whom Dingaan is addressing. Marcus will be so devastated, Dingaan says as Vita opens the door. They are so very attached to each other, Marcus and Genie. So very attached. Probably best not to tell him. Not yet. Vita closes the door firmly behind him without turning around. Chapter 24. Marcus. This is an ending. Marcus feels it in his bones. He can barely make out Genie through the dust. He sees her open her mouth to say something. The voice that comes out of her mouth is not hers, but Karen Carpenter's. She is singing the opening lines to Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft. Marcus wakes up with a start. Karen Carpenter continues singing. Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft is his ringtone. It means his phone is ringing. Marcus reaches for the phone on his nightstand and answers it. On the other end is his mother's voice, breaking. I'm sorry, Mum, we have a bad connection, Marcus says as he sits up in bed. She speaks louder, more deliberately, but all he can make out clearly is the word coma. It is 4:37 a.m. She lives in Belgium now, a new life for herself. He strongly suspects that there is another man in her life. If something has happened to him, this new man in her life, she should not have called. "Who is in a coma, Mum?" This time the only word he can make out is, "Father." Is it Dad? Has something happened to him? Is he in a coma? Not father, sister. Marcus's wife, Esme, makes a contented sound in her sleep and snuggles closer to him. The alarm clock on the bedside table switches from 4:37 to 4:38 a.m. He gets out of bed and goes to stand by the window. Has something happened to Crystal? No, not Crystal. Genie. Genie is in a coma. This time he hears her clearly enough, but finds himself apologizing again. I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't quite understand." "Your father called me. Genie fell into a coma a few days ago. Of course, Vita did not inform him as soon as it happened, took his sweet time." "Genie is in a coma?" he interrupts, trying to sound calm without succeeding. "Now, Marcus, I don't want you to worry. I'm sure she'll be fine, of course." His mother says this in a rushed way that is not at all convincing or reassuring. "Of course," Marcus says, trying to sound convinced and reassured. "You know how Genie is. Resilient." He can tell from the quiver in his mother's voice that she is attempting to smile and not succeeding. "Your father and I have discussed it and have both decided that it is best that I go home. Your father is alone, and this is, well, he shouldn't have to be alone at a time like this." Marcus knows his silence is making her nervous. His mother has never liked silence. "Now, I don't want you making any rash decisions, Marcus. You do not have to go home. Your father and I will handle this." "What exactly is it that needs to be handled?" "Not home. Genie." His mother's voice is breaking up again. "I'm sorry, Mum. We have a bad connection," he apologizes before clicking off his phone. All he can hear now is the sound of his heart beating rapidly. Home. His fantasy of home always begins with the smell of something warm, welcoming, inviting. Vanilla and wood smoke. Then the image. The moonlight comes in through the window and falls onto the narrow bed. Genie's body is covered by a thin, threadbare blanket. Her back is turned to him. He knows that she is aware of his presence because her hand lifts up the blanket. She is not quite awake. She does not turn to face him. He climbs into the bed. The wire springs under the thin mattress creak, a comfortable sound. The saggy cushioning makes the bed sunken in the middle so that he naturally gravitates towards her. He interlocks his cold feet with her warm ones. She doesn't complain. He gathers her in his arms, pulls her to him. She says something delightfully domestic. "Did you remember to lock the chicken coop?" "Mm-hmm," he replies. He looks up at the mosquito net hanging above the bed. Vanilla and wood smoke are trapped in the mosquito net, the mattress, the thin blanket, her well-worn nightdress, her hair, her skin. He breathes in deeply. Without even trying, he falls asleep. Home, a sanctuary, a safe haven. What would have been had his parents not come to take him away from the Beaufort farm and estate. The dawn is breaking. How long has he been standing here? The alarm clock by the bed reads 5:42 a.m. He looks around the room. The four-poster bed, the vanity, ancient and heavy. It has been in Esme's family for generations. The oak wardrobe. The oak wardrobe. There are two of them, identical, one for her and one for him. Both mostly function as decorative pieces, since Marcus and Esme have and use a large walk-in closet. The ottoman, never used, but which looks useful next to the antique-looking but fully functional telephone, which is also rarely used these days. The travel-weary and weather-beaten set of suitcases in the corner that he had bought at an auction because they reminded him of something, a journey not taken perhaps, that made him nostalgic somehow. He goes to the suitcases, opens one of them, and retrieves the copy of the 1965 World Atlas that Genie had sent him. He tries not to think about why he has chosen to place the World Atlas in this suitcase, as he flips to the page he has turned to time and time again, the page with the small reddish-brown handprint on it. Marcus sees Esme move in the bed. He quickly puts the atlas back in the suitcase. Esme's hand reaches out, searching. Not finding him there, she wakes up panicked, instantly fully alert. Her eyes quickly scan the room. They find him. She relaxes. He smiles at her reassuringly. It's a beautiful morning. Esme gets out of bed. Having trouble sleeping again? She asks as she walks towards him. A little. Her arms steal around him. He takes one of her hands and kisses it. This is an old gesture, one that they have both grown accustomed to. Was that a call you received earlier? Yes. Is everything okay? It was Mum. Is she still apologizing? Something like that. Have you forgiven her? Something like that. Marcus? Esme tries to turn him around, tries to make him face her. All felled, are all felled. Who had he heard reciting that poem before? Genie? Chris? All felled, are all felled. This is what happened to the trees of his youth. His mother had all the jacaranda trees in their yard cut down. She had the trees felled, and then left her husband and her home for Belgium a few months later. What had been the point? Marcus disengages Esme's arms from around his waist, taking great care to make the gesture not seem like a rejection. Thankfully, his phone rings. He waits for Esme to leave the room before answering. Dad? Your mother told me she called you. I asked her not to. Didn't want to worry you. You haven't told Chris yet, have you? No, not yet. Best not to. You know how Chris is. And there's really nothing to worry about. Genie will be perfectly fine. You know how resilient she is. She'll bounce back. Something has crept into his father's voice that Marcus does not like. Fear. At work, his father is always in control, always in charge. This man stumbling through words, blindly grasping at snatches of reassurance, is not his father. He loves his self-assured father. This man he does not like. This man he wants to hurt. Marcus says to this man, If anything happens to Genie, it will be your fault. The words surprise him. Immediately he wants to take them back. But his father is not surprised by the words. He even seems to have been anticipating them. You're right. Of course you're right. It is my fault. It is all my fault. The line goes dead, a sudden silence. A feeling of terrifying loneliness overwhelms Marcus. He quickly punches in Chris's number. The phone rings and keeps ringing. That's Chris for you. She is probably angry with him over some perceived injury that he isn't aware of having inflicted. Hi, you've reached Crystal Masugu. Please state your business after the beep. Chris, Marcus here. Whatever is going on with you, you need to get in touch with the family. Genie is in a coma. I need to go home. I need to be with her. Chapter 25. Crystal. As Crystal nears her apartment complex, she fumbles for her keys that have, as usual, fallen to the bottom of her handbag. She ignores her ringing cell phone. Marcus, third call from him, not terribly good at taking a hint. The last time he had called her so obsessively, he had wanted to talk about the jacaranda trees that their mother had chopped down. I want to be left alone, she says under her breath, and almost as if having heard her, the phone stops ringing. Just then she almost steps on something. A shiver runs through her. She is briefly excited by the sudden occurrence of the unexpected. Something is lying on the ground, dead. She begins to walk away, but finds herself going back to check. A hatchling lies broken on the cement. The chest goes up, down, then up again. Breath. A beating heart. Life. She finally allows herself to exhale. She looks at the hatchling and immediately decides that it is a he, even though she has no way of knowing. He is very, very tiny. She looks up, treetops, roofs, but not a nest in sight. Where could he possibly have fallen from? He must have fallen a great distance. It is remarkable that he is alive at all. She moves to help him and then stops herself. If she helps him, will she really be doing more good than harm? Chink, chink. She turns to the sharp metallic sound. Another bird. A full-grown California towie is hopping along nearby, ever watchful. The mother. Crystal is suddenly filled with dread and uncertainty. Will the mother attack her if she moves him away from the footpath and places him in a safer place? Will the mother reject her baby if she, Crystal, touches him? She has heard that happens, that mother birds reject babies that have been touched by human hands. But you cannot believe everything you hear, especially about mothers. Aware of her presence and obviously frightened by her, the hatchling makes an attempt to get up and move away. He briefly struggles to stand, then gives up. He shuts his eyes, and with great effort turns his head away from her, allowing whatever will happen next to happen. He probably thinks that she will harm him, and it saddens her to know that he has reconciled himself to this fate. Life is cruel. What an unfortunate lesson to learn so young. It is something she too has come to accept, being reconciled to her fate. Her life, with all its disappointments, the most recent being a dissertation that remains unwritten after 3 years and a PhD that remains unearned after 6 years. She wonders if this is all there is to life, this being reconciled, which may or may not be better than the waiting to fall in love, utterly and stupidly, waiting to finally knit something, perhaps for someone, from the piles of wool her grandmother has sent her over the years. Waiting to realize one of those magnificently unrealistic dreams she had as a child, becoming a world-renowned ballerina all the way from Africa, a 5'4" supermodel, a devoted wife of an equally devoted husband who is, quite naturally, an architect. The hatchling is no bigger than her thumb. She can actually see the movements of his still beating heart. He is dark grey with scattered tufts of downy feathers like loose clumps of soft grey cotton wool. One tuft rests on the top of his head, a mohawk, giving his face a rebel-like quality. His tongue is sticking out. Do birds have tongues? Well, either way, she will have to remove him from harm's way. She rummages through her bag looking for something to lift him with. She finds a recently received postcard with a picture of the Victoria Falls on the front. The postcard is from her once-upon-a-time sister, Genie, who has scrawled on the back, in her elegantly undulating handwriting, "Remember, there will be the time of the swimming elephants." Crystal has no idea what that means. Genie has always been cryptic, but she is grateful for the card nonetheless, because she can put it to good use now. As gently as she can, but probably not gently enough, she lifts the hatchling off the ground. Chink, chink. She as carefully as she can, places him among some shrubbery where the sharp and ever-watchful mother can see him. She has not done much, but hopefully it is enough. His soft grey tufts of downy feathers flutter, and for the first time she realizes just how windy it is. Is that what precipitated his fall? His unforgiving environment? Chink, chink. Will the mother come to protect him? Will she stay with him or fly up to the nest? Can the mother carry her baby back to the nest? Is she strong enough? Crystal has so many questions. Why does she know so very little about birds? She has done the best she can. She will have to leave it at that. She walks away quickly, not looking back, not wanting the feeling to overwhelm her, even though she knows such concern is already too late. She has only just put down her handbag in her apartment when she decides to go back and check on the hatchling. She finds him having moved off the postcard onto the cold, damp earth, perhaps of his own volition, perhaps propelled by the wind. The mother is nowhere in sight, probably returned to the nest. Is it because Crystal touched him? Well, she cannot just leave him alone, can she? There is nothing else to be done. She will have to take him off the cold, damp earth, out of the wind, and into her apartment. She returns to her apartment and prepares a place for him. She has lived in the same apartment for 6 years and has never had a visitor, never invited anyone in, never taken the trouble to make someone feel welcome, feel at home. This is all alien to her. What would make him, he who is broken, feel safe? A warm place. She increases the room temperature. What else? A container that will not be constraining, that will actually allow him some freedom to move and breathe. She immediately finds a small fruit basket. Perfect. She lines it with soft tissue paper. He will need further protection in his new unnatural environment. She finds a suitable cardboard box, but she needs to make it cozy. She places some of the balls of wool that her grandmother sent her in the box. At last they have come in useful. She remembers the mother's sharp metallic chirp and immediately thinks of the scatting Ella Fitzgerald as a substitute. She shuffles through her playlist until she finds the song Mr. Paganini and presses play. Soon she is outside again, attempting to transport him, via the postcard, safely into the comfortable container. Her hands tremble, overwhelmed by a sense of urgency. To her dismay, the postcard has become entangled in the shrubbery. She attempts to lift him up. Was he this fragile and frail before? This cannot be happening. He is falling again. He lands on the ground with the quietest thud. Her heart skips a beat. His does not. He opens his mouth and lets out a long, silent scream. I know, I know. She carefully maneuvers the postcard out of the shrubbery and gently puts him in the container. He rests his head on the edge of the container. Eyes shut, beak firmly pressed together, stubborn-like. It occurs to her for the first time that he is a fighter, perhaps even a survivor, a rebel with a cause. She takes him into her home. She goes to bed early and cries herself to sleep. The buzzing of her vibrating cell phone wakes her. Marcus. She doesn't answer it. She goes to check on the hatchling. Still alive. Thank God. Please don't die. Please don't die. Please don't die. This is not a prayer. This is a request. She doesn't do prayers, though she believes in God. She simply learned a long time ago that he does not answer hers. She watches the dawn break in a blur. All she can hear is the sound of her own heart beating and her occasional sniffle. She checks on the hatchling. A blur, blinks, sees him clearly. Chest goes up, then down. Breath. Life. Thankfully, he is still there. She was right about him. He is a survivor, a rebel with a cause. I called earlier about a hatchling, a California towhee, Crystal says to the impossibly tall man wearing hospital scrubs and adjusting his glasses behind the desk on which she carefully places the box. The man automatically reaches for a notepad and a pen. Name? He blinks at her and does not even attempt to smile. Mr. Paganini. The man blinks again. First name? I didn't give him one. The man frowns. Oh, you mean my name? Crystal Masugu. The man's frown deepens. Krystle, she spells as he writes. Masuku. He briefly looks in the box, then picks it up carefully and walks away with it. One hatchling, California towhee, for the incubator, the blinking, unsmiling man says, going through swinging double doors. Number? A voice says from within. She named it, Mr. Paganini. She named it? Crystal does not know what to do. Is that it? Is that all there is to it? Should she have taken a picture? She should have taken a picture. Without a picture, she might forget him, and she doesn't want to forget Mr. Paganini. Her phone rings. Marcus, yet again. She ignores it. The blinking man comes back through the swinging double doors. He readjusts his glasses. Then he comes to an abrupt stop in the middle of the room and frowns. He is obviously surprised to find her still standing there. Was there something else? He says, patting his pockets as though the something else might be found in them. Did you want your box back? The postcard? Box? Postcard? No, I'm sorry. I didn't get your name. Xander Dangerfield. You have the name of a superhero, Crystal says before she can stop herself. He smiles a surprisingly dazzling and dashing smile. Are you in need of rescuing? He asks, this time not blinking. His eyes meet hers and he holds her gaze. A damsel in distress? It is Crystal's turn to blink, rapidly and repeatedly. Is he flirting with her? Does he think she is flirting with him? Is she flirting with him? I'll call to check on Mr. Paganini. Thank you, Xander Dangerfield, she says. happy she can find something, anything to say, as she blindly searches for the door, suddenly feeling trapped and very, very disoriented by a feeling that is not in the least reconciled. Frantic to have something to do, she finds herself clicking on her cell phone. You have 9 new messages. First new message. Thankfully, she is out the door. I need to go home. I need to be with her. Crystal listens to these sentences over and over again. I need to go home. I need to be with her. The rest of the message she cannot take in. How can Genie, her once-upon-a-time sister full of love, life, and laughter, be in a coma? I need to go home. I need to be with her. Rewind. I need to go home. I need to be with her. These last 2 sentences she understands perfectly. This is her brother Marcus casting himself once again in the role of hero. If Marcus is once again the hero, that can only mean one thing. In this story which is not make-believe, this story which is not child's play, this story which is all too real, in which Genie ends up in a coma, Crystal is the bad guy, and there is no escaping that fact. Chapter 26. Esme. And just like that, all of a sudden, they are that thing again, a family that does not include her, Esme. There is the grandmother, Eunice, the father, Dingaan, the mother, Thandi, the son, Marcus, the daughter, Crystal, the adopted daughter, Genie, and that's it, the family unit, complete. They have barely spoken to each other for almost 3 years, ever since that business with the jacaranda trees and Thandi leaving for Belgium. But now Genie has brought them together again. They, the family, as a unit, have decided after many phone calls that they will all go home to be with Genie. No one has bothered to ask her, Esme, if she would like to join them. They have, rather conveniently, forgotten that she loves Genie too. Years earlier, Esme had opened her eyes and been surprised to find herself sitting in the front passenger seat of a tiny car. An alien was talking to a DJ on the all-hit radio show. A woman's voice was laughing infectiously. Esme was confused. Where exactly was she? Karen Carpenter's voice started singing, calling occupants of interplanetary craft. This was all too disconcerting. The last thing that Esme remembered was Crystal at the airport saying, in her characteristically sarcastic way, "Welcome to Africa," and the stifling and oppressive heat. Now, next to her, a young woman was driving, hunched over the steering wheel. She was colorful. She wore a patchwork dress and a multicolored scarf, but her colorfulness was more than that. Her hair was the color of flames and created an amber-brown afro halo over her head. She had dark, smooth skin with a glow and sheen to it. Her mahogany neck was long, graceful, and supported her head at an impossibly acute angle. She had high cheekbones and almond-shaped eyes. She looked like something that an artist would draw, incongruous, features exaggerated, but somehow beautiful, perhaps more so because so very different, so very original, so unique. "My, aren't you a picture?" Esme had said, looking at the woman. The woman looked at Esme and smiled at her, a radiant smile. There was a gap between her 2 front teeth. "Goodness, where are my manners?" the woman suddenly said. "I'm Imogen Zula Nyoni. Almost everyone calls me Genie, friend or foe. You can call me Genie too. I am—" An expectant silence filled the air. "What am I?" Genie asked Crystal and Marcus through the rearview mirror. "Our once-upon-a-time sister," Crystal replied. "I like the sound of that. I am their once-upon-a-time sister," Genie said, smiling with satisfaction. "Mum and Dad adopted her," Marcus said, attempting to make things clearer. "But it didn't quite take," Genie said with her radiant smile. "She left us to be with Jesus," Marcus said, with something hard at the edges of his voice. "I see I'm still unforgiven," Genie said, looking at Marcus in the rearview mirror, the expression on her face difficult to read. "Oh, so you're a Christian?" Esme asked. "A Christian? Oh, good God, no. Definitely not. Christians are too hypocritical for me. I like to call a spade, even if I'm the spade." Although she had divulged quite a bit about herself, Esme felt that she still had not quite got hold of Genie, who, although present, colourful and bright, seemed oddly ephemeral. Genie seemed to be on the verge of disappearing just as easily as she had appeared. "Don't bother trying to make sense of Genie. No one can make sense of Genie," Marcus said, sounding uncharacteristically angry. Suddenly the car screeched to a halt and Genie jumped out. "Are we good, do you think?" Crystal asked Marcus once Genie was out of the car. "I think so," Marcus responded. Esme was sure they were talking about Genie. But what about Genie? She could not help thinking there was something beautifully tragic about her, something secret that had made Marcus never tell Esme about her. Genie got back in the car, clutching a bouquet of red and yellow wildflowers. "The flame lily, our national flower. Welcome," Genie said, giving the flowers to Esme. "Thank you," Esme said. "I'm sorry about your parents," she added, wanting to give Genie something in return and finding that she only had condolences to offer. "What about them?" "I thought that since you were adopted—" Esme hesitated. "Oh, my parents didn't die. They flew away," Genie said, flashing her radiant gap-toothed smile again. And Esme believed her. Believed that Genie's parents had flown away. Believed that Genie herself could, at any moment, at that very moment even, let go of the steering wheel and fly away. Simply fly out of the window towards the sky and become a multicolored ribbon in the sky, a rainbow, a wondrous thing to behold. Esme looked at the flowers, flame lilies. They resembled frozen flames and were shockingly beautiful. How could she not love the shockingly beautiful creature who had given them to her? Marcus's and Crystal's once-upon-a-time sister, Genie. Esme had been married to Marcus for 12 years, has been with him for 14 years. His parents attended their wedding, were there for the birth of all 3 of their children. They had even attended her graduation from college and her graduation from law school. But now, after many years of making her feel part of the family, they have closed ranks, leaving her, Esme Masuku, out in the cold, a mere in-law, an outsider. It was their beauty that had seduced Esme and made her, almost from the start, want to be a member of the Masuku family. It was after she had married into the family that she saw them for what they really were, fragile to the point of being brittle. They were delicate and sensitive to the touch. The Masukus were like a glass menagerie, beautiful to look at, perfectly, meticulously, painstakingly put together, but always just a breath away from shattering. They needed to be handled with care, and she has been careful. Even now, as she places a black suit discreetly at the bottom of Marcus's suitcase, just in case, Esme is being careful. She knows that the possibility of Genie's death is a reality that the Masukus are yet to acknowledge, if not to themselves, then definitely not to each other. She lays out the pair of jeans she likes best on him, a t-shirt made of good breathable cotton, perfect for travel, a pair of broken-in loafers, schooners he calls them, underwear, socks, and his favorite leather jacket. So this is how her husband will leave her. These are the clothes he will be wearing, and this is the suitcase he will be carrying when he walks out of her life. Marcus, bless him, is blissfully unaware that this is their ending. But Esme knows that if Genie dies, then Marcus, her husband, this man forcing himself to whistle nonchalantly as he takes a shower, is never returning to her. She knows this because she knows things that Marcus does not know about himself. He does not know that he moves away from her in the middle of the night when they are asleep, that he has asked her more than once, while deep in the fog of sleep, who she is, that when he wakes up with a start, it is always after calling out, "Genie!" He goes in search of Genie every night. He does not know this about himself, because in the morning all is well again. In the morning he is her loving husband. In the morning she tells him nothing of what has happened during the night. In the morning she moves beneath him, above him, beside him, until all he knows is one name, Esme. Esme enters the bathroom, undresses, steps into the shower and kisses Marcus, stopping him mid-whistle. This is how she will let him go. What was it Genie had once said to her? My way of loving him was to let him go. Your way of loving him will be to keep him. It was not easy to let him go. I dare say it will not be easy to keep him, but I have every faith that you will, and you need to have that faith too. But Esme has long understood that she has Marcus during the day only because he is with Genie in the night, in memories, in dreams, in fantasies, in nightmares. If Genie ceases to exist, then what is to say Marcus will come back from the only place he knows he can find her, the night? Chapter 27. Marcus and Crystal. Marcus is, of course, facing the wrong direction, cell phone to his ear. Crystal's cell phone vibrates in her hand, but she does not answer it. We travel not to reach a destination, but to arrive with love, in love, to be with those we love. This is what is printed on the back of his T-shirt, deep stuff, not something she would readily associate with her brother. She taps him on the shoulder. He swivels around. Facing her is not a 40-something-year-old man, but the boy with little legs eager to grow, bounding up the stairs 2 at a time. So this is what Genie's coma has done to him, made him 11 again. I am $6 million man, and you are... Little sis, he says, reading her face, trying to gauge something. I was just calling you. I know. You didn't answer. I know. She removes something from her handbag. Consider this my olive branch, she says, handing it to him. It is a cluster of jacaranda flowers. First bloom. She smiles. He smiles. They hug. The beginnings are always nice. Pretty deep T-shirt you've got there. Marcus examines the front of his T-shirt as though noticing it for the first time. Red, orange, green, and blue lines intersect and diverge haphazardly. Marcus frowns. Yes, I suppose it is rather labyrinthine deep. A flash of recognition. Oh, it's the T, you know, the Massachusetts Public Transportation System. I know what the T is, thank you very much, Crystal says, going to stand behind him again. She reads, We travel, not to reach a destination, but to arrive with love, in love, to be with those we love. Is that what it says on the back? Yes. That's why the words are coming out of my mouth. It's called reading. You should try it sometime. Rather appropriate for the occasion, he says, turning to face her. Rather on the nose. Poor Esme. Poor Esme? She picked out your clothes, didn't she? Yes. You know there is a word for relationships like yours. Loving, symbiotic, caring. Not healthy. That's 2 words. Unhealthy then. Codependent. What do you mean, poor Esme? I mean just that. Poor Esme. Chris. She wants you to come back to her. But I haven't gone anywhere. Says the man waiting for a flight at the airport. Oh, come on. You know what I mean. Hopefully you'll get to know what Esme means, and soon, Crystal says, patting him on the shoulder. Chapter 28. Marcus. As the aeroplane descended upon the land of patchwork green, brown, and yellow fields, Marcus looked out of the window and remembered a time when his entire life had been contained in one of those patches, the Beaufort farm and estate. From up there, the country seemed so peaceful, so quiet, so tranquil. But it has not been any of those things, not since the Liberation War, which has since given way to ethnic genocide, civil unrest, political disturbances, massive emigration, all within the span of 30 years, a generation. Marcus and Crystal exit the baggage claim area, and there they are, his mother, his father, his grandmother, his family. So very changed, and yet so very much the same. His mother sachets towards them, arms outstretched, looking every bit like an actress on stage, a lipstick smile on her lips, but her eyes are sad. So very sad that Marcus cannot look into them for fear of seeing something reflected there that he has yet to acknowledge. Her eyes are the only indication that the play she is in is a tragedy. She throws her arms around him, and he, not knowing what else to do, kisses the only imperfection on his mother's otherwise perfect face. the bite mark from the day he left the Beaufort farm and estate. Marcus shakes hands with his father, a strong, firm, manly handshake that belies the helplessness they both feel. Marcus takes comfort in their tacit pact to feel one way and act otherwise with each other. It is a silent reunion, as it should be. Marcus leans down to hug his grandmother, whose weak legs have confined her to a wheelchair. She pierces him with a paradoxically focused but vacant stare. Just as he disengages his arms from around her neck, she grabs hold of his hand and, suddenly lucid, whispers, "They are plotting to overthrow the government." Marcus kneels down in front of his grandmother and pats her hand in a way that he hopes comforts and reassures her. Who are they? Marcus wonders. His grandmother's arthritic index finger seems to be pointing in the direction of his parents. "Who are you?" his grandmother suddenly says to him, her face contorting in fear, her eyes brilliant with paranoia. "Who are you?" she screams. "You're one of them." "Welcome home," Crystal says to Marcus, as they all quickly exit the airport terminal. Chapter 29. Crystal. You can never go back home. You can never make the same journey twice. The past is always another country. Cliched as these aphorisms are, they are all true, tragically so, Crystal thinks. She never comes back to the same country, the same home. Something always develops while she is away. Things change abruptly. Case in point, the house she grew up in. What was once a grand double-story building with a yard full of jacarandas and flamboyants and a manicured and watered evergreen lawn is now a skeletal frame with a single flamboyant tree, thanks to her mother, and an unkempt yellow lawn, thanks to her father. It did not take decades for things to deteriorate, just a few years. Her mother, a once stand-by-your-man wife, at some point had just stopped standing by her man. Her father, a once avid gardener, at some point had just given up being avid about anything, a development, an abrupt change. Sad. Tragic, really. "You know, the reason Marcus has not been speaking to you is because of the jacarandas," Crystal volunteers as the car comes to a stop at the top of their driveway. She finds herself, as she always does, agitating things. She cannot help herself. She feels that her family needs, no, deserves, to be agitated. "Is that true, Marcus?" Tandy asks. "It's more complicated than that," Marcus says, getting out of the car, not quite able to hide the sadness in his voice. "But I made sure to save the flamboyant, the one you liked playing in, the one with the tree house." "You'll see why the jacarandas had to go once you enter the house," Tandy says, pulling Marcus toward the house. "See?" she says once they are in the house, pointing at the huge cracks in the walls. "The roots were destroying the foundation of the house." "There were always cracks," Crystal says, nonplussed. "Were there?" Marcus asks, genuinely surprised. "The cracks were not as big as they are now," Tandy says, defensively. "If we had let the trees grow—" "The point is there were always cracks," Crystal cuts in. "No. The point is Marcus has to understand why we cut down the jacarandas. It was to save the house." "It was a jacaranda tree," Marcus says, almost in a whisper. "What?" Tandy asks. "The tree house was in a jacaranda tree, not a flamboyant. So you can go ahead and cut the tree down if you want," Marcus says, running his left hand over one of the cracks. He turns and attempts to smile at his parents, but cannot. A development, a change, sad, tragic, really. "All felled, are all felled, of a fresh and following rank, not spared, not one." Crystal recites Gerard Manley Hopkins' Binsey Poplars as she makes her way up the stairs, the rest of her family in tow. Her grandmother's slow progress up the stairs is aided by both her father and Marcus, whom she has forgotten that she has forgotten. "So it was you who recited the poem," Marcus says. "I couldn't remember if it was you or Genie." "It was both of us. We had to recite it in Mrs. Finley's grade 5 class. It was a rite of passage at our school. A successful recitation meant that you automatically got into Miss Forbes' A-stream grade 6 class. Genie particularly likes the lines, "Oh, if we but knew what we do, when we delve or hew, hack and rack the growing green, since country is so tender to touch, her being so slender." Since country is so tender, Dingaan says, speaking for the first time since entering the house. Her father is another change. He looks like a shadow of his former self. Crystal opens the door to her bedroom. The room has been frozen in time, the 1990s. Posters on the walls, popular fiction, magazines and comic books on the bookshelf, clothes in the wardrobe. This is the only thing that has not been allowed to change. Forced to remain the same, it has become uncanny, something at once familiar and unfamiliar. She knows why her room has been preserved. It serves as a monument to Genie's time with them, but it is really a monument to her absence. When the Masugus learned that Genie had left them to live with Jesus, Crystal's grandmother Eunice had descended on the room like a fury. Her grandmother, another change, once strong and formidable, now senile and frail. Her grandmother had got down on her knees and ripped from the floor the adhesive tape that she herself had put there when she found out that Genie was coming to live with them. The tape was supposed to divide the room in half, but it really gave Crystal the lion's share of the room. The Masugus, one and all, pretended not to notice. Genie had never complained. Having ripped off the adhesive tape, her grandmother set to work stripping the bed, emptying the clothes chest, the laundry basket, the bookshelf on Genie's side of the room. She had the gardener and the maid carry the bed, the chest, the laundry basket, and the bookshelf outside. All Genie's belongings were piled high in the middle of the yard. Eunice poured paraffin on top and struck a match, consuming Genie's existence in flames and sending it up in smoke. While doing all this, her grandmother spoke of Genie's betrayal after everything they had done for her. To run off with a man twice her age, a vagabond at that, making the Masugus the joke of the town. After everything they had done for her, such betrayal could not be borne. "Why are you crying?" her grandmother had asked Crystal before slapping her across the face. The first and last time she had struck her. "That girl has proved herself to be a disappointment. Never ever cry for someone who has disappointed you. You hear me? Never ever cry for the ungrateful," her grandmother said, taking Crystal's face in the palms of her hands before engulfing her in a hug. Crystal wished that, like her parents and Marcus, she had not been at home to witness Genie's erasure from their lives, that smouldering ash. Crystal realizes that the rest of her family members have followed her into the bedroom. They look around. They wait, almost expectantly, for Genie to descend from the roof, materialize from the wallpaper, rise up from the floorboards. How old would she be, this Genie that they are waiting for? 10 years old, as when she first arrived? 18 years old, as when she was when she left? 39 years old, as she is now, lying in a coma at Mater Dei Hospital? Her father, her mother, her brother and her grandmother leave the room quietly. They, the lucky ones, can leave. She cannot. She has to live with the absence. She has to live with a Genie who is not there. Crystal looks at the telltale line left behind by the adhesive tape. She gets down on her knees and traces the grimy demarcation with her index finger, tracing the evidence that Genie's life with them had not been as easy as they all liked to remember. They had loved her in their own way, the only way they knew how, jealously, possessively, imperfectly. Chapter 30. Vita. There are tubes everywhere. There is a feeding tube in her nose. There is a breathing tube in her mouth. There is a tube attached via a syringe to a viable vein in her right hand. There is a catheter in her urethra. The bag that collects her urine has been chastely covered by a baby blue cozy cover, an attempt at respect and dignity that seems mockingly too little, too late. Genie's body is in distress. Vita feels it. He also feels the absence. He knows that Genie is not here. The Genie he knew, the Genie he experienced, is somewhere else. Perhaps she is working to come back to this body that was once hers. Perhaps she is not. Her body looks bereft. He wants more than anything to touch it, to give it solace, comfort, life. But he has been ordered not to. In fact, his hands have been encased in surgical gloves and his mouth shielded with a surgical mask. Dr. Mambo has told him in clinical terms what has happened to Genie. She has been kind enough to not fill him with false hope. She has been friend enough to say that she will accept and support his decision, whatever it may be. It has been 7 days. 7 days since he returned from Stockholm. 7 days since he found the 2 glasses with the desiccated lemon wedges on the kitchen table. 7 days since he found Genie's childhood suitcase packed and placed at the foot of the bed. 7 days since he saw the sunglasses on the bathroom basin. 7 days since he left the house that Jack built. 7 days since Genie has been in a coma. For 7 days he has tried to hold on to his anger. For 7 days he has failed. He does not feel anger. He does not feel sadness. He does not feel sorrow. He just feels. He looks at her body bereft and he knows. It has been 7 days since Genie left him. Wherever she is not coming back. Not to this body, not to this life, not to him. Vita is defeated. He can accept any change except death. Death, like a jealous lover, consumes completely. Death will not allow him to intervene. Looking at her body lying there, Vita understands with amazing grace that the body is a threshold, an entry point for something else entirely, something elusive and ephemeral, something precious and beautiful, something that can fly away without a moment's hesitation. He knows what he must do next. Chapter 31. Dr. Mambo. Dr. Priska Mambo does not think that in all her 30 years of practicing medicine she has come across anyone as defiant as Imogen Zulu Nyoni. How long do I have? Those were the first words Imogen had said to her during their initial encounter. A schoolgirl in uniform with her hair reluctantly tamed by a blue, red and white scrunchie. She looked both younger and older than her 16 years, younger probably because she was slightly built, and older because there was an undeniable wisdom in her eyes, something more than mere intelligence, a knowing that had already happened. How long do I have? Imogen had to repeat the question. Since starting her practice in the 1980s, Dr. Mambo had told countless people that they were HIV positive. It was never easy news to break, but she took some measure of comfort in the fact that the people she told were usually middle-aged and had lived their lives. She had never had to break the news to a teenage girl whose life was yet to begin. And Dr. Mambo had actually taken the coward's way out. Once she had received the results of the blood work from the general practitioner, she had decided to tell the girl's guardians the news, reasoning that they were better equipped to break it to the girl. So she was rather surprised when the girl made an appointment and came to it alone. A name on a hospital chart is one thing. The bearer of that name sitting across from you is another. The number 16 next to the word age on a hospital form is one thing. An actual 16-year-old girl sitting across from you is another. How long do I have? As you may know, there is still no cure for HIV, Dr. Mambo said tentatively. There is antiretroviral medicine, ARVs, expensive, too expensive for us at this time, but hopefully in the future, in the near future, in the very near future, we will be able to make them affordable and accessible. We are making definite strides in that direction, so I am hopeful, very, very hopeful. ARVs go a long way towards ameliorating the symptoms. So, like I said, hopefully in the very near future, you will have access to them. How long do I have? With the ARVs, patients, people, have been known to live very long and productive lives. And without the ARVs? Well, there are many variables. How long do I have? On average, once the disease is no longer in its dormancy, people, have lived for up to 5 years without the ARVs, but that is the average. Some people, have lived for up to 10 years, some even longer. A good healthy diet and regular exercise can go a very long way towards mitigating the ravages of the illness. So realistically, I have about another 5 years. So the best I can hope for is living long enough to turn 21. I think you can afford to hope for more than that. You are young and healthy, and, like I said, the landscape is rapidly changing. I'm confident that you will have access to the ARVs. Just then, Jesus walked by the window, pushing his Scania pushcart. Imogen surprised Dr. Mumble by smiling. Don't worry, Doctor. 5 years is long enough for me to do something good with my life. Dr. Mumble had witnessed many different responses from people after hearing that their lives would be curtailed by HIV/AIDS. Women often cried, men often got angry, mothers often became frantic about the futures of their children, fathers often worried that they would not have time to provide enough financial security for their families. Some patients, mostly men, got violent and threw things at her as they angrily inquired of her who had given them the disease. No one had ever smiled. This girl, Imogen, who had probably had the misfortune of receiving a blood transfusion that was contaminated, and who therefore had contracted the disease through no fault of her own, had, instead of anger, chosen to smile. That was when Dr. Mumble had noticed it. The defiance in Imogen. It was in the way she held her head at a particular angle, the way she squared her shoulders, the way she looked you in the eye. She was determined to face and perhaps conquer whatever came her way. She had seen things, experienced things, and understood things that could have broken her, but she had used them to grow even stronger instead. And Imogen had made good on her word. She had done something good with her life. A few years after their first meeting, while shopping at Solomon's, Dr. Mumble had come across Imogen and Vita de Villiers standing in the spice aisle. Vita was reaching for a bottle of olive oil on the top shelf. Olive oil is situated in the spice aisle at Solomon's. And Imogen was looking at him, watching him closely. She looked so fulfilled. It was as though in that moment Vita was doing much more than simply reaching for a bottle of olive oil. It was as though he was giving her what her heart truly desired, and that he had parted seas, moved entire mountains, slashed through fortresses and slain dragons just to give it to her. Vita put the bottle of olive oil into the shopping basket that Imogen was carrying, and he looked at her with such contentment. It was as though she held every precious thing that heaven had bestowed on him in her arms. It was that look that had let Dr. Mumble know that Imogen had done something good with her life. She had found someone to love, and she had found someone to love her. Dr. Mumble took a lot of comfort in Imogen and Vita's love. Love was such a rare commodity. It took real courage to seek it, to hold on to it, and to treasure it. Most people in her situation had long since given up being courageous. At a time when it would have been so much easier to allow oneself to give in to the barrenness of existence, love was the truest defiance. Dr. Mumble so often saw Imogen and Vita together, driving in their impossibly tiny Austin Mini Cooper, walking the streets with their Scania pushcart that was always laden with scrap metal, shopping for groceries, that she started thinking of them as an inseparable unit, Imogen and Vita. Dr. Mumble even thought of the HIV as theirs, not just Imogen's. And so it had been difficult to break the news to Vita. When he had brought Imogen to the hospital 7 days ago, he had looked stricken, pale, could not speak, could only hold on to Imogen. It had taken 2 male nurses to pry her from his arms. And then he had stood there, covered in Imogen's blood, waiting. It had been difficult to tell him that he need no longer wait. It had been difficult to see him walk away alone. Imogen has been her patient for more than 20 years now, and Dr. Mumble has seen evidence of her defiance repeatedly as she struggled with pneumonia, tuberculosis, and meningitis. This time, however, cervical cancer has given Imogen's defiance a different form. Her defiance has presented itself as peaceful surrender. Dr. Mumble opens the orange and brown curtains in the room, wondering, not for the first time, why anyone would have thought that orange and brown were appropriate colors for a hospital room. In her opinion, both colors are too morose and subdued to provide any real comfort and hope. A hospital room should make every attempt to be colorful, especially a hospital room with Imogen Zula Nyoni in it. Rays of weak, wintry, early morning sunlight break through, providing the room with light, but not nearly enough. Hospital policy stipulates that no lights are to be turned on during the day except in the operating rooms. Dr. Mumble defiantly turns on the fluorescent light above the bed. It is the least she can do for the person lying on the bed. But there is no person lying on the bed. Dr. Mumble hastily picks up the patient chart and flips through it. She has provided strict orders that the patient should not be moved. She has not ordered any tests for the patient. No time of death has been entered. So there is no reason for Imogen Zula Nyoni not to be lying in her bed. Dr. Mumble flips through the chart again and again, but still she cannot find the reason why the bed is empty. To Dr. Mumble's relief, 3 nurses enter the room pushing a trolley piled with bed linens, hospital gowns, sponges, antiseptic soaps, gauzes, syringes of various sizes, a blood pressure pump, a thermometer, an array of disposable needles, scissors, cotton wool, and a blender with liquefied beige food in it. The nurses are evidently not happy to find a patient-free bed. "Where is the patient?" one of the nurses asks, mild accusation in her eyes.